Hello! It's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Hazards of the Old Ones, Part 2, Chapter 7, The 11th Daughter. So last week, we saw the Stellar Marines trying to grease Captain Davidge into appointing another Marine as first officer aboard the Seeker. The posting gives them a fair amount of prestige, gets them more stuff from the fleet and the League X Commons, yada yada yada. So they're pretty keen on replacing Lieutenant Kylos with another Marine. Of course, Captain Davidge, suspecting that they gave Kai one hell of an out-processing hard time, laid it out for him. Like, if I hear that she was out-processed roughly, if I hear she was busted down to butt-dripping private, if I hear that she was abandoned at Blanchefort dock, I'm gonna be pretty pissed off. Lieutenant Carbomir, who was the liaison for the Marines, sort of scrambled around and he assured Captain Davidge that that didn't happen. Of course, it did happen. So we'll see what his words have in store for Lieutenant Kylos, how they change the situation. This week, the 11th Daughter, and as we know, the 11th Daughter is Princess Vrock of the House of Xandar, the cursed one, the sad one, the one who's blamed for everything that goes wrong. But that's on Xandar. There are other 11th Daughters. There is another 11th Daughter in this book whose life was very different. And we shall see how that shakes loose. So, this is a longer one. Let's proceed immediately. Enough of my rambling. Part 2, Chapter 7, The 11th Daughter. When Kai awoke in her bed, she felt as if the last day had been nothing more than a strange, uncomfortable dream. She was certain she'd awake in her familiar quarters on the Seeker, still a first officer, still a Marine. She looked around and her heart pinched. She was in Pendar Tower, certain enough. She was in her vast, comfortable guest bed, nude, her towel thrown aside. Her dirty dress was sitting on the chair in a corner. Tweeter, silver and glowing, was fluttering about on the windowsill. She was slightly hungover. Carahill was nowhere around. Back to the green of the grove, she guessed. He had seemed strange last night. Intense. Frightening, in a way. She wondered if she had dreamt the whole thing. There was a scratch at the window, and Tweeter fluttered up. At the window, a small cat gazed in, apparently wanting to eat him. She gave the pane a stiff rap with her knuckles. "Go on, get out of here," she said, and the cat moved away. She grabbed her towel and wandered out onto the terrace. Far below, down the precipice of the mountains, was Blanchefort village, huddled by the bay. She could clearly see the long, straight run of Bloodstein Road. To the south of it were the orderly residential nooks of Scientown. To the north, the craggy confusion of shops, chapels, inns, and pubs. The grocery where she began her subterranean adventure was along that road somewhere. Wearily, she put on her rock-stained dress and boots. She had nothing else to wear. She asked Tweeter to show her where the kitchen was, and she followed him down. There she met the staff. Once again, they eyed her filthy dress and bade her allow them to wash it. They gave her a thick robe to wear, and putting it on in a bathroom, she handed over her dress. The staff then made her breakfast. Thanking them, she ate alone in brightly lit, colorful Capricos Hall at the huge feasting table there. Dav and Sig, gone. Lady Poe, out on yet another date. Eating alone at the huge 200-foot-long table was horrible. The last time she'd been in Capricos Hall, she was with Dav and Sig, Inez and Bethriel of Moan, the 5 of them, one big happy family. She stared at her plate of pancakes and ate her food mechanically. The staff came out every so often to see if she needed anything. The table in the hall could probably seat 300 people, and there she was alone, sitting meekly at one end. "Looks like it's just you and me, Tweeter," she said as he bounced around on the tabletop. She recalled Carahill saying Tweeter was just a Silvertech automaton, a gadget, no heart, no soul. But to Kai, especially after his performance yesterday, he was her chirping little friend. She broke him off a little bit of pancake and he pecked at it with gusto. She had no idea if he was actually eating or simply simulating the act, but still, watching him work on it was comforting. Tweeter, her only friend in this huge, mostly empty castle. Kylos of the silver bird she had thought of in the shower. She sort of liked the way that sounded. She finished her lonely breakfast and decided to go out onto the grove. "Take me to Carahill's Walk, Tweeter," she said, and he guided her out into the sunny morning. It was a typically bright yet chilly northern setup. She closed the folds of her robe and held it shut. She wound her way through the huge grove with Tweeter leading the way. The complex twisting layout of the grove with avenues of trees, dead-ending in old Vith courtyards laid out in no particular order, was boggling. Without Tweeter, she'd be lost once again. He took her through the clearing in the trees, crisscrossed with walkways leading in various directions. This was the inner plaisance of the grove. In the center of the clearing was a statue of a large fox in a vaulted gazebo of stone, surrounded by well-tended flowers. Foxes were sacred animals for the Vith families, like the Blancheforts. Foxes were said to commune with the elders in the days of old, and every Vith estate had a fox shrine somewhere on the grounds. The fox was carved in a sitting position, its dog-like face looking up to the heavens. Dav once told her there were over 100 fox shrines located on the grounds, scattered about. Continuing on, Tweeter led her towards the dense grove of beech trees. "Wait," she stopped. She was certain she saw the fox statue move. She looked at it. Just a large statue of gray stone, marbled and blended somewhat with bits of garnet and olivine. The statue just sat there in its little gazebo, looking at the sky. Following Tweeter, she plunged into the line of beech trees and left the statue behind, though she was certain she saw it move again, poking its head out of the gazebo. She arrived, after some time, at Carahill's Walk and sat down on the low stone walls surrounding the courtyard, waiting for him. He usually came blundering around a corner, full of charm and wit. The beech trees here were huge and twisted, a black framework holding up a green canopy. Nearby, a fast-moving creek flowed with dark, cold water. Tweeter flew off to a tree and hopped around on a branch. He argued with other birds in a fuss. Carahill was nowhere to be found. She waited and waited. Nothing. Through the breaks in the canopy, she watched the sky get progressively darker blue as noon approached. A sure way of telling you were very far to the north. Every so often she caught a glimpse of silver moving through the green. She saw glimpses of silver horses, birds, much bigger ones than Tweeter, rabbits, frogs, and something that looked like a bear gazing at her through the branches. Lady Poe sure loved creating Silvertech animals. But no seal. No Carahill. Maybe he didn't need her help after all. Knowing his love of pranks, maybe he was jesting. Maybe it was all a big joke. Kai felt a bit of disappointment pass through her. She saw something sitting on the courtyard wall near the trees. Curious, she got up to see what it was. It was a book entitled Carahill's Magic Books of Things to Do and Memorable Quotes. His diary, the one he brought everywhere with him, conjuring it up whenever he wanted to write something down. Her husband also did things like that. He was a note-taker too. She picked the book up. It was way heavy, and opened it. The silvery pages were lineless, and Kai hated paper with no lines, with little illegible scratchings here and there. Carahill needed to work on his penmanship. Of course, he didn't have hands, so perhaps he should be forgiven. Leafing through, she turned to a series of simple sketches. The sketches were three-quarter bust shots, scratchy and childlike, and they were vandalized with Carahill's beloved to-do lists and little random doodles. Yet they had a definite sense of style, and she could recognize each one. There was Dav and Sig, drawn full of life and bounce. Several of Lady Poe, and one of Enes the Hospitaller with his winged helmet. Another drawing was of a stocky fellow wearing a triangle hat and trench coat. He smoked a pipe. She didn't recognize the man. Standing next to him was a tiny black-haired woman with round eyes and a ridiculous smile. She seemed to have a shadow mark, just like Sig and Lady Poe. Odd. On the next page was a drawing of herself holding a mug. It was just an abstract sketch, but she liked it, was flattered by it. Her husband had painted several portraits of her back home in Tusk, but they were all very ideal and angelic, painted in a fashion that her husband wished her to be, as opposed to what she actually was. This sketch here was grittier, slightly annoyed. It was more true to her. She'd have to ask him if she could have it, or maybe he could do another one. On the next page was an abstract sketch of a weird tree with branches like tentacles. She got the hint of planets and galaxies nurtured in the twisting branches of the tree. At the top of the drawing, Carahill looked down on a basket full of kittens nestled in the branches. Carahill and his kittens. Looking at it further, the sketch was odd. The basket the kittens were in was round instead of rectangular. The kittens were drawn all around the basket, and some were even upside down. Carahill had drawn himself holding something in his flippers, several oblong objects that looked like dolls, and he drew himself with a tear rolling down his face. It was actually kind of a sad sketch. On the facing page was a series of quick jots. These Kai was able to make out, but just barely. They said, complications. Number 1, sisters. A, why did the sisters come to Blanchefort? B, sister dubbed Blondie by LB was not due her fertile period for years hence. What happened? Why that particular sister who had a long-standing affection for LB? C, did someone tamper? Someone must have tampered with Blondie to create chaos. Need to investigate. 2, messages and other ill portents. A, have become aware of a troubling series of messages that have been showing up with fair regularity. Didn't see anyone leave messages. I should have seen. B, CB has received messages and heard voices. C, LB has received messages. I think he has seen things too. D, DO has received messages. DO is a project. Need to properly motivate DO. His help will make this easier. E, MK has received messages, heard things, and seen things. Something pursuing MK. Need to keep a sharp eye. Provide encouragement. F, messages all signed M. 3, wildcards. A, several characters have made their way into this scenario that could be problematic. B, PV, a sad case. Very powerful. Someone has had at her and made her greater than what she was. Must let her play her part if this is to be a success, no matter how much it hurts. Her role is key. C, LM. What is LM? Who is LM? Got a mind like a jar of peanut butter. Can't sift through it. I don't understand. Mutation? And what are those things under his clothes? To do. Research LM. 4, assessment. A, somebody's cheating. M is cheating and annoying me too. B, checked with CA. Claim innocence. C, allow PV to continue, though if she harms anyone, it will be my fault. D, watch LM and assess his situation. E, messages. A demon's hand is at work. One demon or several demons might be doing it. F, 4 demons missing from the windage. checked roster. G. Identity of missing demons as posted in the weekly windage rostrum. Bar Igura, Ibelex, Mab Sornath, Mayax. H. Probable candidate of message sender. Mayax. Need to keep a sharp eye. I. Mayax presence will prove problematic. Must protect MK. Mayax. Who's Mayax? She put the book away. On the other side of the wall was a small box full of sleeping kittens. She knew Carahel liked to adopt lost kittens, and here was the proof. She thought to bring them all out of the chilly air, but they seemed perfectly happy where they were. Several smooth rocks bunched around the box were warm. He must have heated them up somehow. Sitting on the rocks was a kettle with milk printed on the side. A saucer sat nearby. Carahel was doing a good job taking care of them. She looked around again. Still no Carahel, just his book and his kittens. The kittens were fine, saved by their silvery protector. When was he going to come charging in to her rescue? She left the courtyard and, with Tweeter's help, made her way back to her tower. She found her dress, cleaned and folded, sitting on her desk chair when she arrived. There was also a note sitting on her desk. She thought about putting it aside unread, but her curiosity quickly got the better of her. She opened the note. It said, "Do not go to him. You have been warned. M." Another creepy note. M again. Who was M? What was M? This one couldn't be from her commander. Carahel seemed to think M stood for Mayax. Who's Mayax? The chicken scratch in Carahel's diary mentioned something about Mayax and demons. Demons? She didn't quite like the sound of that. She sat down at the hollow terminal and fired it up. She tried looking the name up, but being a novice at using the HoloNet, she came up with nothing but several entries for businesses and places named Mayax. There were quite a few. She hated the Canaan HoloNet. It was too hard to use. The blues had it all yucked up. The Arcanek back home on Onaris was much more to her liking. She supposed she could check with her husband. He'd probably be able to tell her who Mayax is right off the top of his head. But checking the time, he was conducting class now, and she was mad at him to boot. She'd figured it out for herself. She looked at Tweeter sitting there on the shelf. She had a thought. "Tweeter," she said, "I'm looking for information on a creature named Mayax. Can you lead me to anything pertaining to this entity?" He chirped and flew to the door. She got up and followed him out into the corridor and down the lift. She wondered just how abstract a command she could give to Tweeter and expect him to successfully execute it. If Tweeter could lead her to pay dirt on Mayax, then who knows what his full capabilities might be. Did Lady Poe realize he could do things like this? Probably not. He led her out into the main hall of the castle and into the quiet southern wing. This was a part of the castle she had never seen. Things looked even less familiar to her than usual. She saw no staff along the way. The southern wing appeared quite deserted. Tweeter wound through several long corridors into a central nave where 4 large cathedrals loomed side by side. The cathedrals were empty and silent, murky with the solemn light of stained glass. The tart smell of age-old incense hung in the air. Tweeter veered to the right and flew into a medium-sized library tucked snugly off the main drag. She followed him in. He settled on a cozy confusion of bookcases in the rear of the library and came to rest in front of a thick, hide-bound tome. Kai grabbed it by the spine and slid it out. "This the one?" she asked. It was a thick book of mythology and lore. Surprised by its weight, she lugged it with 2 arms to a reading table. There was a book already sitting on the table on a wooden stand. It was open to a colorful illustration of several spherical gems that caught her eye. The gems were colored with reds, purples, and greens, like fruits. Pretty to look at. There was a short notation. Bright stones. Vith name, Ilia Cranthor. ancient barrel stones once used by the elders for the purposes of operating a number of wondrous technological devices, most of which have fallen into obscurity. The bright stones have been attributed with a number of various useful properties over the centuries, including unlimited power source, ability to affect climate over a large area, self-replication, ability to teleport from place to place over vast distances. In 004562EX, the Sisterhood of Light undertook a series of quests over the course of 100 years to gather all known Brightstones, referred to collectively as the tasks of Va and Fockwell. The origins of the Stellar Fleet can, in part, be traced to these quests. The sister recovered, as a result of these quests, 10,500 Brightstones, all documented. The recovery of the Brightstones coincides with the ascendancy of the sisters as a major league sect in 004663EX. No further Brightstones have been uncovered through the centuries, though 4 are thought to reside somewhere in Zaffin space. It is also suspected that the House of Want discovered the methods used to create Brightstones and incorporated them as functional parts of the various advanced machines they created before departing the League in 000011AX. The current whereabouts of the stones recovered by the sisters is unknown outside of the Sisterhood. Cool stuff. She'd have to look at it further later. Kai pushed the book aside and threw the one she'd been carrying to the tabletop. Smelling of old leather and vellum, she leafed through the pages. Lots of stories written longhand in both Vith and in the common League tongue. Lots of pictures, too. She found a detailed picture of a space station being destroyed. Zal 88. She remembered that one from when she was a kid. Zal 88 was a Zaffin space station over Gothen, a place of great learning and enlightenment, which was odd for them, as such things usually weren't high on the Zaffin's list. It was looted and destroyed by the House of Xandar centuries ago, who was jealous of their secrets. All dead, Zaffins loved to beat each other up. Moving on, she eventually found what she was looking for, an illustrated story called The Death of the Bodice. The story was a long and sad recounting of the history of the House of Bodice and their eventual extinction 3,000 years ago. There it was. Tweeter was right on the money. Mayax was a creature whom the Bodice turned to for help. Mayax lied to the Bodice. Mayax tricked them and offered up their bodies as burnt offerings to a horned god. Mayax was a demon. The Bodice were gone, and it was Mayax who did it. There was an illustration of the Bodice being sent to their fiery deaths. Looming over them, wringing his hands, was a lurid, monstrous thing with lust-filled eyes and a huge head, watching as they died. Mayax. It was a creepy picture. So who was this Mayax fellow at work here? Was he leaving she and Sig little notes? Why? What for? Did he want to sacrifice her to a horned god too? Where would that get him? She heard a bumping in the shelves and a rustle of paper. She looked up from her reading and whirled around. She no longer felt alone. Kai closed the book and made to put it back. She heard something. She listened a moment. Another bump, shuffling, and a hint of movement. Something was moving through the stacks. Tweeter, she said, "Let's get out of here!" She left the book where it was and tore out of the library into the hallway, moving fast on her long legs. Abandoning any pretense of noble decorum, she fell into a full sprint in her robe. Tweeter flapped slightly in front of her. She thought she saw something come to the library threshold in her side vision, but she didn't look back. She didn't want to see. Tweeter led her back to the familiar areas of the castle, and she began encountering the staff going about their work. They wanted to know why she was running. She told them she thought she saw an intruder in the southern wing. Several staff went back there and returned several minutes later. They saw nothing. Kai calmed herself and caught her breath. She felt a little silly for panicking and for informing the staff. Dav always told her his old castle was haunted, and now she probably experienced her first ghost and freaked out over it. The staff didn't seem to think anything of it. They were probably used to seeing ghosts. She followed Tweeter back up to her room, her thoughts full of Zal 88, the bodice, and Mayax, a demon. Her imagination was certainly working overtime. She was determined to sulk when she got back to her room, to sit there in her robe and feel sorry for herself some more, to be mad at the whole world, to be mad at her husband for kicking off this whole sorry mess, to be mad at Dav for not having the decency to beg and plead her on his knees to stay, and to be mad at Sig, the interloper, for breaking up the fellowship in the first place. And lastly, to be mad at herself for allowing her pride to ruin her life. She sat on her bed and stewed for a bit, and then, bored, she went back out onto the terrace. In the clear air, she could see all the way down to the Brantball pitch at Sarfartnum College. Pendar Tower had a great view of it. A match was in progress, and she watched the tiny movement back and forth across the pitch as the three teams mounted on wheeled cars jostled the ball around. The yellow team from Saga Convent appeared to be cleaning up the magenta and sky blue teams. The 40s appeared to be in trouble in this set. She loved Brantball. It was much more suited to her personal taste, unlike bowling, which she disliked, especially the prospect of having to do it naked, which Sig was pushing hard for. Tweeter sat with her on the terrace the whole time, bopping around in her lap, occasionally flying off and disappearing to chase other birds, though all she had to do was say Tweeter, and he'd reappear ready to go. She looked around for that cat she'd seen earlier, in case he was still hungry for Tweeter. She didn't see him. She got up and looked over the side of the terrace, just a sheer drop to the rocks far below. It made her a little dizzy. Brave cat. She returned to her seat and sat out there until the game ended. The yellows from the convent appeared to win in straight sets, despite being double-teamed by the blues and magenta-clad 40s. You can't win them all. She went back to her room. She was restless. She sat down at her desk. The creepy note was still there, possibly written by a demon's hand. She pushed it aside and fired up her terminal. A message appeared as the cone began to form. Lost kittens are where you find them. Think happy thoughts. Kai chuckled a little. She must be losing her peasant mind. The cone was ready, and she checked her marine login for messages, more out of habit than anything else. She figured, given her hasty gait the other day, her account would be dead. To her surprise, it was still open. To her further surprise, she had several new messages from her commander's office. The messages were long and rambling, apologizing to no end for her treatment, for her drumming out, and for the seizing of her uniforms. They stated she was retroactively promoted from private to ex-lieutenant, a de facto major, and a jump of 2 grades. They also stated she was to receive a commensurate back pay of 2 months, reflecting the grade change. Another message said that a marine cutter ship will be arriving at noon on the morrow to take her anywhere she wanted to go. Lastly, they asked for her to contact Captain Davidge at once and perform a final debrief. They enclosed an active authorization code for her to use when contacting him. Dav. No doubt the Marines had already contacted him regarding getting another Marine installed as her replacement, and he, suspecting her treatment, made his displeasure known. Scrambling, they sought to make amends, for they sorely wanted a Marine as his first officer, and they were willing and eager to thoroughly grease her to help pave the way for it. It was good to have friends. Smiling, her previous bitterness falling away and wanting to see him and hear his voice, she responded to the commander's message, stating that she shall accomplish the debrief as requested. She then contacted FleetCom, gave them the code, and after a few minutes, Dav appeared on the cone. Her heart jumped. She was grateful they were still in comm range. He was in his quarters, his coat and gun belt off. It must be night bell. Behind him, the stars moved across the window. "Dav!" she said with glee. "It's good to see you." He moved the screen to face the couch and sat down. Sig, wearing her nightgown, appeared and snuggled in next to him on the couch. They were both all smiles. "Hi, Kai," she said. "Kai, I've been so worried about you," Dav said, the relief at seeing her clear in his voice. "I inferred from my previous conversation with Lieutenant Carbomir of the Stellar Marines that your outcrossing session didn't go well." "Well, Dav, I really can't blame them. I gave them no notice. I didn't even let my commander know what was going on. I didn't show them the proper courtesy either. It goes both ways, I guess." Her arms around Dav's neck, Sig chimed in. "They're sending a ship or something to meet us in space. They want to board. Dav hung up on them. You should have seen it," she said happily. "Dav, they really want my replacement to be a Marine. It's important to them. Please, as a favor to me, at least let them come aboard and hear what they have to say. This whole deal, it isn't their fault." "Have they made amends? Are you a lieutenant still?" "I am, Dav. Actually, they made me an ex-lieutenant." "Really? And passage? Are you stranded there in Blanchefort?" "They're sending a cutter ship tomorrow." "Good. Good. We'll take it if you wish, or stay and be our guest for as long as you need." "Hey, Dav, is the southern wing of the castle haunted?" "Yes," he said. "The whole thing is haunted, Kai," Sig said. "Isn't it neat?" Kai shook her head and got her Pendar Tower key out. "Well, it's wonderful. Where should I leave this when I depart?" "Keep it, Kai, and use it whenever you want. Pendar Tower shall be your home away from home." "How's the castle, Kai? Do you need anything?" Sig asked. "Well, castle's great. A little empty and frickin' haunted, but great. And no, I'm fine. I don't need anything." "If you change your mind, be sure to see Andorra, our head of staff. She'll get you whatever you want." "Also, I'm certain that Poe's gone out on another outing, yeah?" "She is." "Did she leave you a tweeter?" "She did." Kai reached up. "Come here, tweeter." Tweeter came down and settled on her finger. "Handiest thing. How long will he last, do you think?" Sig thought. "How long? Well, if Poe made him for you, then I suppose he'll last as long as he's in fairly close proximity to you. That's a guess, but there's no expiration date on Silvertech. He'll last as long as he was made to last." "Well, good. Good. Hey, Sig, I wanted to ask you, you like crawling around in the tunnels under the castle, right? Have you ever ended up in that little grocery in the middle of the village on Bloodstein Road?" Sig rolled her eyes up and thought a moment. "The little grocery on Bloodstein Road. Oh, yes, I believe so. There's that strange pillar with the garlic in the back, right? And then the hole at the bottom. I think I scared the grocer half to death when I popped out. The poor fellow was all, 'My countess this and my countess that.' He was coming back to see if I needed anything, and then I was gone, stuck in the hole. He probably thought I was a ghost or something," Kai said. "Did you make it all the way to the castle going that route? That's a pretty tight squeeze." "What are you saying, Sig?" Kai asked, laughing. Nothing. It's just that's pretty small going. Even I get a little stuck. Also, you shouldn't do tunneling alone. Okay, that can be very dangerous. I don't want you to have to worry about you." "Well, you do it alone." "Well, yes, but I can always waft out of a tight spot. I'm not a good example to follow. If you want to do some exploring, there's a lot of fun, beginner-level tunnels near the Holt Courtyard in the Grove. You can't get into trouble in those. Just make sure you let the staff know where you're going and when you plan to finish up so they'll know to look for you. That's the main thing about tunneling and caving. Someone always needs to know where you are. Just for in case. No sissy beginner's tunnels, Sig. And I'm not alone. I've got Tweeter with me. I asked Tweeter to get me up to the castle as fast as possible, and up we went. It was fun. I can see why you like exploring those tunnels so much." "Well, wait a minute. You used Tweeter to get through?" That's cheating. Well, scrabbling around in the dark, hopelessly lost, doesn't sound like fun to me. Besides, Sig, not all of us have an arcane black hat compass buried inside of us like you do. Well, all right, touche, she said, laughing. Hey, maybe when you get back, we can all hit the tunnels together and crawl around a little. You haven't explored it all yet, Sig, have you? No, not by a mile. Good. Then we'll make it a date. We'll crawl around a while and then wash the dirt out in the pubs. Maybe catch a match, just the three of us. Davidge laughed. You too. You love mucking around in the dark, don't you? Well, what do you say? Is it a date? Well, fine with me. Me too. They talked for a bit more, and then the cone went blank as they calmed out, and Kai was all alone again in Pendar Tower. Still wearing her robe, she fell asleep in front of her terminal, the hollows swirling in a dance around her sleeping head. She dreamed of her friends. Kai awoke the next day. As before, she took Tweeter and went down to the kitchen. Again, she ate alone in the huge, empty Capricose hall. When she finished, she went back to her room to dress, and then stepped out into the huge terrace overlooking the village by the bay. Down below, she saw the red and black rocket shape of a marine cutter ship at rest at the dock. All she had to do was go down there, get on, and go home to Tusk. Home, where she could be a peasant along with everybody else. She grabbed her bag and followed Tweeter out of the grove. She was going to walk to the beach hanger and go back in the hole. She was going to go down the ladder, through the cavern, and into the crawl and out the hole in the grocery, probably giving the grocer the fright of his life again. Then she was going to go to the cutter, go home, have kids, and become an old woman. She locked up Pendar Tower and followed Tweeter out into the green. Ahead to her right was the huge mushroom-shaped mound of Dead Hill, a massive Blanchefort necropolis. She remembered Dav telling her that he often could see the ghosts of his ancestors looking down from up there, their withered faces, their reaching hands. A disembodied spectral gown jumped out at Kai from a stand of trees. Headless, its arms waved. With a cry, Kai jumped back, again reaching for her SK that wasn't there. The gown slumped. Shiny strings caught the sunlight, and a laughing Carahill came from around the corner. Oh, Kylos, forgive me. I couldn't help it. Thought you could use a little good humor. You screamed almost as loud as my mother, Lady Poe, did the other day. Kai glared at him. Very funny, Carahill. Oh, please, don't be sore. Just a bit of good humor. I've got to get this gown back into the Countess's closet soon, or I'm a goner. But it's just so much fun. Goner, huh? Kai said with thoughts of stealing the gown dancing through her head. Carahill cut the gown down and, holding it in his mouth, shook it to clear the leaves and dirt. So, he said, are you going somewhere? I'm leaving on the cutter ship that's waiting for me in the village. Really? Heading home, are you? And our agreement? Well, what about it? Where were you yesterday? I waited for you. Didn't see anything but your book and your cats. The kittens, you mean? Did you feed them? What? Feed them? Did you feed the kittens? I left some milk. She was taken a little aback. No, that's your job. They're your cats. He smiled. Sure, it's my job. Doesn't mean I don't need a little help sometimes. I was hoping you'd feed them for me. Now look, they missed their lunch yesterday. And by the way, they're not my kittens. I have simply been entrusted with their well-being. He looked up at her. Can you take this, please? The Countess's gown, I mean. Kai took Sig's gown, and Carahill reached behind the wall, taking the kitten's box in his teeth. Well, no harm done. I gave them an extra big breakfast this morning. Come on, let's get them inside. They began walking back toward the castle. Sorry, Kai said. I'm sorry about the kittens. I should have given them a little milk. So where were you yesterday? I was indisposed yesterday. There's a great deal to prepare. I left a note here somewhere, he said, looking around. I'm ready to begin now, however. His voice was a tad muffled from carrying the box. Kylos held Sig's gown aloft as she walked, trying to keep it from dragging. Well, I'm sorry, Carahil, but I have to go. My ship's waiting for me in the village. My husband's waiting for me. You're gonna play this out to the bitter end, aren't you? He said. What do you mean? They walked into the clearing. To their left was the Fox Shrine and its stone gazebo. Kylos, as time is short, I'll bite. I'll say it. Say what? By the way, that fox statue was moving around by itself yesterday. Well, of course it was moving. It was possessed yesterday, but it's fine today. I really need you. I need you to help me. Is that what you wanted to hear? It is, isn't it? Kai looked dubiously at the statue. Possessed. By what? And what do you need me for, oh all-powerful Nargle spirit? I'm a Johnny. I can't do anything. I have no gifts. I can't see through walls. I don't have super strength. I can't teleport or disguise myself. I can't dirge. And I can't look into people's souls. It was possessed by a demon yesterday. Don't worry about it. It's gone. And that's precisely why I need you. You, Kylos, as a Johnny, can go places and do things that no Blue could ever hope to do. Did you know that? You've no gifts of the mind, and that is true, yet you still your heart, and your courage, and your devotion. How many times did you stand giftless back to back with Lord Blanchefort, you saving his life, and he saving yours? I'm asking you to show that same courage now, to stand with me, and help me. Oh, I don't even have a gun. They approached the castle. No gun? Oh, what's this? What's this, I wonder? Kylos felt something heavy and solid suddenly fill up the limp structure of Sig's gown. She reached down through the neck and found a large gun hidden within. It was a Marine SK pistol, full magazine, in excellent condition. She felt the weapon with her hands. This is my SK, the one I turned in. I'd know it anywhere. How did you... Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted a brand new SK or your old one back, so I gambled and got you your old one. You want a different kind of gun? You want a Grenville 40 or a Herkimer Heat? How about an Inzeroff D series? Kai was disgusted. How about no? An Inzeroff? Give me a damn break. I'll take an Inzeroff if I want to die. Expertly, she worked the finely crafted controls, cocked the primer, and set it to safety. SK's the best damn gun ever made. Inzeroth, my butt. I could use a holster, though, she said. Oh, what's this? What's this? A holster and belt came out of the gown next. It's great to be me, he said. You certainly don't mind doting on yourself, do you? Kylo smiled and put the belt on and holstered the SK. A wave of relief spread over her, its familiar weight at her hip a huge comfort. They arrived at the rear of the castle. Tweeter popped up and flew into the trees, again feisty with the other birds. One moment, Carahil said, loping into the castle with his box of kittens. Kai pulled her SK and checked the magazine. Fully loaded, 25 shots, 50 caliber short jacket. The good stuff. After a minute or two, Carahil returned, minus the box. The kitchen staff promised to feed them 3 times a day. Kittens will be fine. His diary appeared. He scribbled in a few things with a marker in his teeth, and then it vanished along with the marker. Kai popped the chamber and reholstered her gun. What about my ship? How am I going to get home? If, after all of this is over, you still want to go home, I will take you there. Now, shall we? We've far to travel. Kai was still holding Sig's gown. What about this? This needs back in Sig's wardrobe. Here, Carahil said, let me. He took the gown in his teeth and bounded into the castle. He returned a few minutes later. Done. Are you ready? Kai looked up and saw Tweeter sitting there in the dark branches of the tangled ash trees, still fussing with other birds. Smiling, she opened her bag. Hop in, Tweeter. We're going. Tweeter winged down from the branches and disappeared into the depths of her bag. Carahil shook his head. Tweeter sure does look delicious. Kai glared at Carahil. Well, if you're hungry, I'd go get a sandwich before we start, and leave Tweeter alone. By the way, where are we headed? South. About 1,500 miles. Well, where's the rip car? I guess I'm driving since you don't have hands. I'm not a very good driver, though, I'm warning you. No foolish rip car, Kylo. She'll be taking Air Carahil. Much more stylish than a rip car, any day. Kylos looked at Carahil and laughed. A little small, aren't you? Before Kai could blink, Carahil was suddenly huge. Dav had said the original Carahil was 15 feet tall. This Carahil was now easily that big. You were saying? Ha ha ha! Now, time is of the essence. Let us be off, he said, his voice echoing a bit with his sighs. Dubious, Kylos, holding her bag, climbed up his back. His skin was smooth and strong. She found a comfortable spot on his back and sat down. After another moment, Carahil took flight. Not the quick, jerking movements she was used to with Dav in the rip car, but smooth, measured strokes. Soon they were high in the air, level with the tallest castle spires. Kai felt safe and snug on his back. She didn't even feel cold. Hey, wait a second. Kai saw one of the noble bronze statues lining the battlements in the northern wing was wearing Sig's gown. Others had several of Sig's knickers pulled over their heads like little caps. Kai was open-mouthed in shock, but then she started laughing, Carahil's sense of humor starting to agree with her. He veered easily to the south, a vast mountain stretching as far as the eye could see. There was huge Mount Vith, big and cone-shaped, and to the west was the slightly smaller Mount Durst, also cone-shaped. Far away past Mount Durst, like a white and green toy, was Castle Durst. Through the mountains or over them? Carahil asked as he settled into smooth, level flight. Over them, please. He smiled. Over the mountains it is. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 7, The 11th Daughter. So obviously, Kylos is an 11th daughter. She has a lot of brothers and sisters, and she's the 11th one. No curses or stigmas or anything like that with Kai and her family. They grew up poor, but they grew up as a fully functional family. Lots of stuff happens in this chapter. We see cats. Once again, Kai sees a cat out of her windowsill and sees a cat following her around, and she senses that she's being pursued by something that looks like a cat, although it's much larger than a cat when she was in the library. And she even heard it say, Zal. And if you remember, if you're paying close attention, Zal is the same name, or is the same sound anyways, as Zal 88, which was a space station orbiting the planet Gothan while it was being terraformed. And the inhabitants of Zal 88, worshipping a cat goddess named Mab Sornath, grew to have great enlightenment, such that the House of Xandar, jealous, wanted to steal the enlightenment, and not able to decipher what they were seeing, they just killed everybody there and destroyed the space station. Yeah, not very pleasant. Kai also hears the name Mayax, and she reads up on it, finds out, according to the old stories, Mayax is a demon who betrayed the Bodice, the House of Bodice, to their deaths. And once again, if you remember the prologues, Prologue 3, which was called The Death of the Bodice, that story of Mayax and the Bodice is told in detail. But in that story, Mayax was no deceiver, no demon. He loved the Bodice. He cared for them. It was his bad use of power which caused the universe to turn against the Bodice, and they died. But it wasn't anything he did intentionally. But as 3,000 years have passed, all that's been lost. And now the stories of Mayax and the Bodice are one of evil and deception, where Mayax was a deceiving demon who gleefully led the Bodice to their deaths, which isn't what he did. Just a little inside story from me to you. And finally, Kai and Carahill set off on their adventure to the south. Long chapter, but a fruitful one, and I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, part 2, chapter 8, Larson of Zenon, Verlin of Hobby. And so our attention returns to the Seeker, and we see several candidates arrive to take over the first officer position. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.